Welcome to another episode of Deaver Farm Explorers. It's me, Farmer DJ, and I'm here at the Deaver Wellness Farm at Lankenau Medical Center. And today we are continuing our series talking all about seasonality and sustainability. We're going to learn what those two terms mean. And of course, as always, we're going to start out by taking a walk around the farm, checking on our plant friends, and seeing what they've been up to in the past 2 weeks. We've had a lot of sunshine and a lot of heat, so they are growing fast, so we have a lot to update you on. And then we will dive right into our lesson, learning about how seasons change on the farm and how we keep a sustainable growing practice here. We'll end our episode today by making a seasonal recipe together, so be sure to be following on our info handout. And I think it's about time that we head on into the farm and check on some plants. First, let's take a look at our herb and flower garden to see what's been blooming. One of my favorite blooms this time of year is chamomile. Chamomile is a medicinal plant, which means that we can use this plant as medicine. Some of the benefits of chamomile include helping with sleep, and it's very calming. It can help with digestion, and what you do is you would dry out the flowers, you let them dry, and then you would make them into a tea. Another one of my favorite blooms is also a medicinal plant, which is called calendula. Calendula is another kind of plant medicine that is used to heal and protect skin. So you can soak the calendula flowers in oil and then add it to other cocoa butter and things like that and make a really nice skin lotion that will keep your skin really nourished and protected. Remember last time we saw how much our peas had grown and we saw a lot of flowers blooming? Well, guess what? All those flowers turned into pea pods. These pea pods are my favorite farm snack. You just pick one right off and you pop it in your mouth. Our peas aren't the only plant that are very busy flowering and fruiting. We also have some tiny little squash on our squash plants. Remember our mighty little sunflower stems from our plant parts episode? Well, let's check in on how tall these sunflowers have gotten and what's happened next. These are our first sunflower blooms of the season, and we are going to have many, many more. And this morning we already saw a very, very happy little bumblebee getting to work pollinating these flowers and drinking up all the yummy nectar that they have to offer. Another smart stem we talked about in our plant parts episode was the stem of the hyacinth bean. This is a vining plant, and we said we would check back in to see if it was climbing up the trellis. So let's see if it is. Speaking of a trellis, let's check in on our tomato plants. These tomatoes have gotten really big since the last time we were together. So what happens when tomatoes get big and tall is that they need a little bit of help. So remember we saw our peas and our hyacinth bean growing up a trellis? We do the same thing for tomatoes, just a little bit differently. So as you can see, we have these tall stakes that go all along each raised bed. in between the tomato plants. And the next thing that we do when we have our stakes in is we tie string from one stake to another, and we put them on either side of the tomato plants, and they weave in and out like this to hold them upright. Because otherwise, if they were growing tall, 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 and they had nothing to lean on, what do you think would happen? They would fall down, right? So we're just helping these mighty tomato plants keep upright so they don't fall down when they're trying to grow up. We do the same kind of trellising for our pepper plants and our eggplants. One of my favorite flowers on the farm is actually an eggplant flower. If we think about the color of an eggplant, that they're a deep purple color, it kind of makes sense that their flowers are purple too, right? And purple just happens to be Farmer DJ's favorite color. So I think it makes sense that a purple flower turning into a purple eggplant would be one of my favorite things to see. And of course, last but not least, we have to check on our green bean plants, right? Green beans are another plant that produce flowers before they produce green beans. So when we see a flower like this one, we know that pretty soon that flower will be pollinated and it will turn into a long, crispy, delicious green bean. Did you also know that green beans are in the same plant family as peas? So if you think that the flowers look a little similar to the pea flowers that we saw last time, you wouldn't be wrong. They produce very similar looking flowers because they're both called legumes. That's the plant family that beans and peas belong to, and they're both really nutritious for us, providing a lot of protein and other vitamins and minerals for us to eat. First thing we're talking about today for our lesson is seasonality, which means that here on this farm, we grow with the seasons. This farm is a 4-season farm, which means that we grow through all 4 seasons: winter, spring, summer, and fall. Let's take a look and see how the farm looks different at each season. Seasonal growing means that you grow what's best for that season at the right time. So you can't grow tomatoes in the winter time, right? You wouldn't grow lettuce in the late summertime because it's too hot, right? So plants really love a certain kind of weather. Certain plants can grow all year round, like carrots and beets, but other plants need to be grown at a specific time. So here we are on the farm. It's a beautiful sunny day in June. So when we look around, we're looking at summer crops. So these are things that like to have a lot of heat, they like a lot of sunshine, right? It's different from what you might see growing here in April, in the springtime when it's a little bit cooler. So those plants might be a little more tolerant of cold, and the plants we see growing right now are a little bit more tolerant of heat. So if we think about our tomato plants, right? These tomato plants love the sunshine. We actually call them solanaceous crops. That word sol meaning sun because they love the sun. Other solanaceous crops are eggplants and peppers that are all planted in this section. And we know that we need to grow those plants in the summertime because they need a lot of sunlight. Do you ever notice that the sun takes a lot longer to set in the summertime? And in the wintertime, the sun sets a lot earlier. That's because the duration of sunlight changes throughout the year. So a day like today, we have more than 12 hours of sunlight. But on a winter day, we might only have 10 hours of sunlight. So what that means for our plant friends is that some of them don't have enough sunlight to grow in the winter months. So they need to be planted at a certain time to soak up all of that sunlight throughout the day. By growing with the seasons every year, we're waiting for just the right time to grow certain things on the farm to make sure that they have the most sunlight and everything that they need to grow into really happy, healthy plants. Something that we do as farmers is we extend the season. So that means that we get a little bit longer time to have a harvest, or you can plant something a little bit earlier to make sure that we get a little bit longer harvest period, which means that we can just get more of that plant to produce food for us. One of the ways that we're able to do this is that we are lucky enough to have this big, beautiful greenhouse. Let's go ahead inside and check out how this greenhouse helps us extend our growing season. Here in the greenhouse, there's plenty of protection from cold, wind, and other kinds of weather that might be harmful for certain plants at different times of the year. So the greenhouse is where we plant our seeds way early in February and March. When it's still really cold outside, we are able to keep the greenhouse warm enough so that those seeds can germinate, because we know now from our very first lesson that seeds need warmth to germinate. So since we have this place to keep them warm, that's one of the ways that we extend our growing season. Without the greenhouse, if we were growing all of our seeds outside, we would have to wait a lot longer and wait until it was warm enough during the day and at night to plant our seeds so that they would have enough warmth to germinate throughout the day. Right now in the greenhouse, there's not too much stuff growing, but what we do have planted here in these trays is some of our fall successions. So to give you an idea of how the seasons rotate on the farm, we are planting now in June for things that we want to harvest or eat in the fall, so in late September, early October. So we are consistently on a cycle of planting and waiting and harvesting at the right time for that plant to grow in that season. Some of our favorite crops to grow in the fall are some of the ones we have planted right here. So we have kale and collard greens and other brassicas. This is another plant family called the Brassica family. So kale and collard greens and cabbage are all part of the Brassica family. And brassicas are one of the plants that we can grow almost year-round on the farm. They're very adaptable, which means that they can tolerate both cold and hot temperatures. So the greenhouse, with its protective walls and the heat that we generate in here that comes from the sun, right? Remember, through the ceiling? The greenhouse serves as a protective space that helps us extend the growing season. So grow some of those spring and summer crops a little bit earlier so that we can harvest them for longer. Let's check out another way that we can extend the growing season, so way that we can protect the plants so that they're able to grow in colder temperatures. When we see these hoops, these metal hoops on some of our raised beds, they're there because they support a certain kind of covering. Now we have two different kinds of coverings that we use here at the farm. One of them is called REMAY. That's a kind of thick covering that protects plants from the colder temperatures. Remember we mentioned that when we saw the covering on top of these potatoes and scallions a little bit earlier in the season? We were using those because even if it was a little bit warmer during the day, in the winter and the spring, sometimes the temperature gets really, really low at night, and that can be really, really harmful for plants that we have growing in these raised beds. So the way that we protect our plants, which makes it easier for us to plant them a little bit earlier and make sure that they are kept warm on those cold nights, is by using that REMAY, those covers, those thick covers that will actually increase the temperature for the plants by a couple of degrees. Let's take a look and see if we can remember how it looked when we had all those covers on here at the farm. So our country, the United States, is split up into what we call growing zones. So these are the ways that the country is divided based on the climate that you're living in. So we are in zone 7, which means that we can grow different things at different times of the year that maybe looks a little bit different from, let's say, Florida and what they can grow at certain times of the year, or Northern California and what's good for them to grow at certain times of the year. So let's take a look at this chart and see where we land and how the country is divided by climate. So here in Pennsylvania, we are in Zone 7. It's almost the summertime, which means that we are transplanting a lot of our summer crops. So that's the tomatoes and the eggplants that we just saw. We're also transplanting our cucumbers, which is another summer crop. They're ready to climb right up this trellis. We have our summer squash that's almost ready to start fruiting. And some of the spring crops are starting to come out of the ground. So unfortunately, our beloved pea plants are gonna come out of the ground pretty soon. Our lettuce plants, things that are gonna be too hot. They don't tolerate the heat as well as some of our summer crops. At this time of the year, those plants start to come out of the ground to make room for some of those summer crops, and in a couple of weeks, we'll start making room for our fall crops. So it's a constant cycle here on the farm, which is what makes us a 4-season farm. We keep cycling throughout the year, and sure enough, by the end of the winter, we are already planting the seeds for the next spring. So why is it important for us to grow with the seasons? To make sure that we're paying attention to the weather and our place on the map to see what's best for our region to grow at certain times of the year. It's important to us to grow with the seasons because it's one of the ways that we practice sustainability here at the farm. Sustainability refers to a way that we care for the environment and we care for people and the planet in a way that makes sure that we will have a healthy planet and a healthy food system and healthy people for future generations to come. Sustainability can mean a lot of different things on the farm. It can mean that we are reducing the use of natural resources like water and coal. It also means that we aren't using any harmful chemicals that would be damaging to the soil or to our bug friends here on the farm. That's another way that we are sustainable. So let's take a look around and see if we can find some ways that we are growing sustainably here on the farm. One of the ways that we are practicing sustainability on the farm is by conserving water. So that means that we are only using just the amount of water that we need to keep all our plants alive, and we're not wasting any of it. So one of the ways that we conserve water as a natural resource is by using what we call drip irrigation. Our drip irrigation system uses a steady flow of water that drips right into the soil and gets right into the root system of the plant instead of the kind of overhead watering system that we would maybe see on some other farms. So instead of a sprinkler or a spigot spraying water all around and on top of the leaves of the plants, this helps us save water because it's going right into the soil and it's not spreading out over the tops of the plants. So we end up using a lot less water by using this kind of system. So if we see, we have our water turned on right now and our plants, our thirsty plants are getting a nice drink. So we can see that if we lift this up, it drips out very slowly and it's going directly into the ground. So we know from our plant part lesson that the roots are going beneath the ground and they're searching for water and nutrients. So this is how we get the water directly into those root systems to travel throughout the rest of the plant. Another precious resource that we conserve or try to use less of on the farm is energy. So I'd like to introduce you to our solar pavilion, which generates energy for the farm. This solar pavilion not only provides shade on a hot day, which we are very thankful for today, it also collects sunlight. So just like our greenhouse collects sunlight through its transparent roof, this solar pavilion is collecting sunlight which can be transformed into energy that fuels different parts of the farm. So for example, if we have our cold storage where we keep all of our freshly harvested vegetables, that is something that runs on energy. So we can use the sunlight gathered from these solar panels on top of the roof of the solar pavilion to transform into energy, which feeds the cold storage unit so that we're not using energy from other sources. Let's check out another sustainable growing practice we have here on the farm. Remember before we said that there are two different kinds of row covers that we use. So covers that go over the raised beds that we have using these metal hoops. The first kind we said is called REMAY. It's a thick cover that protects our plants against cold weather. The other kind is something that we call insect netting. We call this row cover insect netting because it helps protect against bad insects. So here on the farm, we've talked a lot about some good insects, some good bugs that we have that help us with things like pollination and composting. But there are also some insects that we have here on the farm that are here just because they want to eat all of our food. So in order to make sure that we have food to feed our community, we have to defend our plants against these kinds of insects, right? So we put up this insect netting, which you can see is a little bit thinner than the REMAY. So it helps the plants to breathe, it lets in air and sunlight, so we can use it in the hotter months. But what it's doing is it's forming a protective barrier around the entire raised bed of plants to make sure that those little crawly insects or those little flying insects don't get into this raised bed to munch on all of our beautiful, fresh produce. So as you can see, the way we use these row covers, this insect netting, is that in the summertime, we switch out the REMAY when it gets a little warmer, and we put on the insect netting to cover the whole bed, and we stretch it over the top, it's pretty stretchy, and then we weigh it down on the sides with these weights to make sure that it doesn't blow off with the wind. So by using this insect netting, what we're doing is making it so that we don't have to use pesticides. Pesticides can be harmful chemicals that are used to make sure that those kinds of bugs that want to eat all your vegetables don't get onto those vegetables. So these are pesticides that will not only kill the bad bugs, but they can also kill the good bugs. So a way to be sustainable on the farm is by using protection instead of pesticides, instead of chemicals, to make sure that our good bugs are kept safe while we're also keeping the bad bugs off of our plants. Another way that we can practice sustainability on the farm is by using compost. In our last lesson about healthy soil and compost, we said that compost is a kind of fertilizer. It's a natural fertilizer made from reducing waste. So not only are we reducing waste, we're keeping our garbage out of landfills, but we're also making a natural fertilizer, so something that's really good for the soil. Without compost, if our soil needed nutrients in it, some folks choose to use chemical fertilizers. And these can be really harmful for all of the life that we talked about that lives in the soil. They love compost, they love making compost and having compost in the soil. These chemical fertilizers that add nutrients to the soil in an artificial way can be really harmful for the soil, and they can also be harmful for our water supply, because the water, when it rains, the water that comes through the soil and filters through the soil, if there's too much of it, it's called runoff, and the runoff can carry those harmful chemicals into our water supply. So by using compost, you're helping the soil to be healthier, and you're also making it so that we don't have to use these harmful chemicals just to get nutrients into the soil. So now we know that there are a whole bunch of ways that we can practice sustainability on the farm. And we also know that by growing with the seasons, we are keeping a sustainable growing practice. Did you also know that you can practice sustainability by eating with the seasons? Speaking of eating, let's head on over to Helen's kitchen to see what yummy seasonal recipes she's cooking up. As always for this activity, you can follow along using our lesson info sheet. Let's make a yummy recipe.
Hey, I'm Helen, and I'm one of the educators at Greener Partners, and I love to be with Farmer DJ on the farm at Deaver when I can. But today I'm actually in my kitchen, and we're gonna make a snack together. The first thing that we need to do though is to go and harvest some things from my little container garden, which looks a lot different from Deaver Farm. So let's go. So where I'm growing looks a little bit different from Deaver, right? This is where I have a really sunny space where I live, and I'm growing in containers. So rather than growing in big raised beds, I'm growing in small pots, which is a really good thing to do in a small space. So we are going to pick some sugar snap peas and some herbs. The snack that we're making today is a yogurt dip, and we're going to use all kinds of yummy vegetables to dip in. So we need some peas, first thing. Probably one of my favorite vegetables. This is where the peas are growing. This is kind of the end of the season for peas. They're a spring crop. They really like cool weather. And what I am gonna do is, I'm gonna pick all of the peas, and then later on, when it's kind of the end of the summer, early fall, I will actually plant another succession. So it'll be another crop succession of peas because they can grow in the fall. Again, they like the cool weather, so spring or fall is a great time to grow peas. Let's see if I can get a few more here. Okay, great. So now we're gonna pick some herbs. So I've got some mint growing here. I'm gonna grab some mint. I'm gonna grab some basil, growing right here. And then I'm gonna grab a little bit of parsley and some thyme. And this is one of my favorite herbs. It's called sorrel. It's really lemony, super, super lemony and strong. So I think that'll be yummy in the dip that we're gonna make, because the dip also has lemon juice, so that'll kind of highlight that flavor. Let me just think. I think that's it. You can see behind me here, these are some of the summer crops that I've got. So there's some, you can see the flowers coming up on these. These are going to be cucumbers. I've got a bunch of cucumbers growing here, and squash, eggplants with these really pretty flowers. Those are the eggplant flowers, and some tomatoes back there. So lots of summer crops growing to keep me happy until it's time to plant peas again for the second succession. All right, let's head back to the kitchen. Okay, we are back in the kitchen. We have some yogurt, so it's plain yogurt, a cup of that, which I've already measured out. Then we've got our herbs. So the herbs are plants with really strong flavors. We talked about, you guys know, the mint flavor, right? That sorrel has that lemony flavor. There's a lot of great flavors that are in those herbs. You can probably make this recipe by yourself. You can tear up the herbs. So let's take some of that mint, for example, and just tear it up. But if you do have a grown-up nearby, you can get some help chopping. So when you chop, you want one hand flat on the top of the knife, the other hand is pushing down. One that's holding the knife is just pushing down and chopping. All right, so we've got a bunch of herbs. It's really strong flavored, strong smelling plants. And then we've got lemon, really sour. I love lemon, so I'm gonna add a lot to this dish. You can add, I like to add maybe a half first, half of a lemon, and then see if that's enough. If you want, you can always add more if you like lemon a lot like me. So we've got our first three ingredients: yogurt, herbs, and lemon. And now, a little bit of salt. Just a pinch of salt. And we're gonna stir it up. And there is your snack. Super easy to do, super yummy and fresh. And we're gonna come back to the snap peas that we've harvested and taste it. And I've also got some carrots and radishes, which are really seasonal. So I cut up some carrots. You can go ahead and dip. This recipe probably makes enough for 2 to 4 people to enjoy. So happy eating. And I think time to go back to the farm.
Wow, what a great way to use seasonal ingredients and practice sustainability in our very own kitchens. All right, friends, that's our lesson for today. Thank you for tuning in, for learning with us, for cooking with us, and tasting with us. stay tuned for next week when we keep talking about sustainability and learn more about food systems. As always, you can check back at our lesson info sheet to learn all about the words that we learned today and to see our recipe that we made and get to know some of the terms that we were talking about during this lesson. So that's it for today, and we'll see you next time.